Hello, everybody, and welcome to the SecureAF Podcast. I'll be your host today, Tanner, and I've got here with me Keelan.
Keelan Knox in the flesh.
Thank you for joining me. You might usually see me on the After Dark, but I'll be dual rolling this one. I'll be running host for today. So Keelan is somebody who I had the pleasure of bringing on as an intern. And he had kind of an interesting story for how he got into cybersecurity, and it's very different from how I did. So I thought, people always talk about, oh, you have to do this to get into security. You have to get this cert, this degree, X, Y, Z. And I thought let's talk about some kind of how it used to be and kind of how it is now. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to kind of share a little bit of the differences. So what I guess I can start off. So personally, I am a principal engineer alias. I've been a pen tester for years, and I had a background in network engineering. And I started off, let's go all the way to the start, right? Started off building computers on the floor, young kid, ended up moving into hacking and phone phreaking a lot of stuff, and kind of really got into that deep hacking culture. Kind of moved on to a VOTech, where we had a vocational school at the high school I went to, thankfully. We got to learn computer networking there. It was a computer networking and security class. Honestly, it wasn't a very well-developed class. Gotcha. It was not nothing like we have today, really. Right. You could get a CCNA from the class, which was like the best thing. That was really good, For reference, I did graduate high school in 2010. So this was probably 2008, 9, 10. Gotcha. So I got that, ended up finishing up my 2-year, got my 2-year degree in cybersecurity, network security, I think it was. Realized
that you actually got a degree in network security.
Yeah, a 2-year, right? But I didn't even put it on my resume. We'll go on. So I guess from there, I got hired at the school to do help desk. And that was really the most important thing that I got from school, was getting that foot in the door as help desk there. Yeah. I remember actually I was able to mess with some Wi-Fi and stuff there. It was back whenever, people were still running web, and, I found some issues, and that ended up what getting me the job, is I found security issues there, funny enough. And they were like, oh, some networking, and I ended up going from help desk there to networking there. I left there, and I went to Dell, and I stayed at Dell for a long time, and I worked my way up in the support side on networking. Gotcha. And so I went help desk, kind of admin stuff, to networking admin, to kind of networking support, engineering, and went all the way up in the networking. Meanwhile, I never quit hacking stuff. That was always my hobby. Never quit playing with that stuff. Really self-taught on most of that.
I feel like a lot of people who start out on the networking side tend to be hobbyists of security or cybersecurity.
Yeah, well, that used to be very common for sure, and I kind of want to get into that. So from there, then I moved straight over to security. And kind of straight into like pen testing. I think it was just security engineer, but into pen testing and learning risk assessments and stuff like that. And then I've kind of moved upward from that. So that is kind of what I feel like is the old school approach to getting into it, where you learn something really well, like sysadmin, or you learn network admin, or you learn something like that. You learn how to secure it as you do it. And then from there, it transitions into security. Because back in the day, it wasn't really a security field. Everybody is security, right? Mm-hmm. Every admin was responsible for their security.
Gotcha.
Very few organizations had security 15 years ago or 10 years ago.
We didn't hear about a lot of breaches back then either.
Well, yeah, it's true. There wasn't as many ways to monetize it as I think a lot of that. There's people realized, oh, we can make money with this, and then you start seeing ransomware and extortion. Yeah. And so I think that's probably a lot of it. So, yeah, I think that now there's a lot more and better ways to get into security, where you don't have to do, 10, 12, 15 years doing admin stuff. Right. Because there was not really any SOC analyst roles out there. There was no entry cybersecurity roles. The only thing that I really knew about whenever I was in high school was, if you want to hack things, you can go work for the government. That was what everybody told me. And I was like, well, I want to hack things, so that's cool. I never wanted to work for the government, but I did want to hack things. And I eventually kind of learned, okay, there's a private sector, and then it started growing, and then I was able to find my way into it. So I think that's total opposite almost of how you got in.
Man,
You wanna share your story from what you started off doing, if you have school background or anything,
man.
because I know you didn't even come from IT at all.
No, to be perfectly honest with you, no, I did not come from IT. My path was not as interesting and as had a solid foundation as yours, to say the least. Um, Basically, I want to kind of before I go into that, I'm curious to know, before you went to vocational school, how did you become exposed to the concepts and ideas of hacking, cybersecurity, and so forth, and that also sparked the interest in you early on?
Man, I just wanted to find it. It was you had to want to. So I remember just taking things apart and trying to figure out how things work.
Mm-hmm.
Phones was a lot of the early stuff for me. Learning how to phone phreaking, that stuff, like that was learning how to get free long distance calls and learning how to
Gotcha.
how to do stuff like that, where we're playing with blue boxes and red boxes, and you could exploit pay phones by playing tones into them.
Yeah.
Where you emulate coins dropping, and you could play with some of that. And I was pretty young. I was definitely one of the younger people in that crowd at that
Gotcha.
point in time. Most of those guys are definitely older than I am.
And the reason I asked that is because, like, early on for me, as a kid, as a child, I was somewhat similar, where I would enjoy just like taking electronic devices apart. Didn't have a computer early on back then. I don't think my family received the first computer until maybe my senior year of high school. So a lot of like the networking stuff, like I was never familiar with. The closest thing that to hacking or even just scripting and coding that I can recall is just MySpace days.
Right? Yeah.
That's about it. Basically going and finding like custom code, learning how to access the dev tools to change things up a little bit, and then also understand like what's the called the characters that you needed, like the ahrefs to change like the sites, change the fonts format of how your page looks and so forth. That's where it started for me. In terms of like college and the path I took to get here, I graduated high school, attended University of Georgia, ran track, was a hurdler for a few years, and I also studied computer electronic engineering.
All right. All right.
I basically did not learn anything from my experience there in the classes. Took my first JavaScript class, flunked out of it, just basically dropped it all together. I missed one day of class and fell so far behind. I felt like everyone in the class with me, they were already familiar with coding and scripting and so forth. From there, I kind of got into music, performing, which then eventually led me to move to North Dakota and work in the oil and gas industry. This would have been back in the end of 2011. I did that for a long time. Worked as a shop hand, worked on the drilling rigs, installing wellhead equipment, worked in the office a little bit as an account manager, and then I did that all the way up until COVID, and basically decided to pivot into the tech industry, not specifically cybersecurity. I was just interested in finding a job where I could work remotely and get closer to my family.
Yeah.
So I would basically go to YouTube University, see what entry-level certifications I could find, and basically did self-paced coursework. Whatever I could find, I researched it, tried to learn it, worked on projects. Then it wasn't until like late 2021, I think it was. No, late 2020. I started reading in the news about all these security breaches, the job demand, and how so many jobs wouldn't get filled. I was like, oh man, that sounds interesting. What is cybersecurity?
That was a crazy time too, because everybody was the work from home had already started and already been going on.
Yeah.
And then things started getting hacked because
Right.
everybody stood up this new infrastructure real quick and all these new VPNs, and it was a total mess as far as it goes. So there was a lot of news. That was definitely a good time to kind of jump in on some of the topics.
A lot of the information still kind of went over my head because I didn't know that hacking was like ethical hacking, for instance, right? There was a career in that. I didn't know what it was, what it entailed, what it involved. And as the only thing that most people who are not familiar with the IT or tech world, when it comes to cybersecurity and ethical hacking, is what they hear about in the news, which is I'm one of those individuals. It wasn't until I started learning about social engineering and physical security testing that I began to, I guess, obtain a strong interest in actually pursuing a path in it. It felt interesting. I felt like a lot of the skill sets from my childhood, my past, in terms of like the people I grew up with, I felt as though, especially in terms of physical security, a lot of that translated over.
Same. Yeah, so we would call it urban exploration. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. We like
That's one way to put
it.
it.
Yeah. We did a lot of urban exploration, which really was. We were just going through abandoned buildings, and we just thought it was cool. You know, we'd go pop into those buildings and just hang out and explore stuff and look through different stuff, and that was a lot of how I learned about some of the physical stuff that I still use today, that I never realized at the time I was doing that, you know?
I mean, there were definitely times throughout high school you would sneak away to go to a party. If you don't have a house key, you just pick out like maybe a student ID card, maybe a debit card of some sort, an old card you found, and just pop the lock.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So I'm curious, how did you first learn about Alias? Where was your...
So this would have been in 2021. There's an organization that the director of cybersecurity at Rose State pretty much is the president of AFCEA or FCA. Yeah. They were hosting a cybersecurity conference. I volunteered for their golf tournament, and one of the presentations there was about social engineering. And I thought that was interesting because none of the other talks even came close to it. I was like, I'm interested in this. I want to see this presentation and also ask questions to see how I can do just that.
Right.
And so that's where I learned, that's how I discovered Alias, because Alias had a booth or a table set up right where the other exhibitors or vendors were. And I just struck up a conversation, asked questions. I missed that presentation because I got basically caught up trying to pick locks for the first time.
Okay.
But me being intentional, I think it was maybe someone from the sales team. I said, hey, is there any way I could get in contact with someone to basically schedule a visit to stop by the office and also just ask questions? I'm still new, trying to figure out and understand what this career is all about. Obviously, the social engineering is a part of the culture at Alias. I want to know more. I want to, just get in the know.
Right. So, I remember I showed up in the SOC hanging out a few years back, and it was you just showed up and started asking questions.
Yeah.
I mean, that was basically it. You're just, what are you doing? What do you guys do?
And I think I stuck around for maybe 3 hours.
Yeah. And you kept writing stuff down and taking notes and all that. And I think you came back up a second time, and I know I'd seen you at conferences and stuff, but whenever you came back a second time, I could tell that like everything that I had told you, you had taken an action on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you had learned about that, and you had like follow-up questions, and you knew more. And so that was like, I feel like to me that was more than you get in most job interviews, right?
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. I kind of was messing around, dabbling a little bit with some network penetration testing through Station X. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. They offer a couple courses, and so I went out of my way, bought my own wireless adapter. It's like, okay, this is what this does. Okay, I can basically de-auth my phone. Cool, learned that a little bit. Then it went from, after the conversation I had with you as well as some of the other engineers, I started buying physical security too.
I remember that, yeah.
And showing up to the conferences, and I remember Kemet had his half door that he demos at some of the events that he goes to. I was like, oh, I got one of those. I got one of those too.
Nice. So, so you mentioned, I don't want to gloss over it too much, you did mention Rose State. So
right.
So what's your take on this? So do you think you need to go to college? Do you think what's your take on that?
Um, it depends on the person, right? If you prefer going the traditional route, you learn best in a classroom setting, 100% just go to college. Ask questions, figure it out, follow that path. You're guaranteed to, at some point, land somewhere in this space. But if you're a go-getter, you are willing to go beyond the traditional norms of and actually network, build relationships. College is, I mean, you can bypass that very quickly. Um, Me personally, the college route became, I guess, real for me because I was offered a leadership opportunity. And through that leadership opportunity, and basically my education became free to me. So it was like, okay, let me just continue and stick with this path.
Okay. Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. I think that well, I guess let's finish your story. I want to talk about college though.
Okay.
And I want to talk about the path that a lot of colleges are pushing.
Mhm.
So from there, then we had an internship, right?
Right.
So you applied for the internship. At that
Yep.
point, we saw your name pop up. I was like, "Oh, Keelan!" Didn't even read your resume. I was like, "Hell yeah, dude! Yeah, he's a for sure. Interview that guy." And then interviewed you. Wasn't a surprise. Brought you on. And then from there, you kicked ass in the internship, and then got on as a SOC analyst, right?
Right.
So kind of tell me about internship to SOC analyst, and
Okay.
what did you not know you had to know? Was there challenges?
For me, it was the internship was great. It was awesome. I learned far more than I thought I would, but what it allowed me to do was connect the dots on everything that I was learning at that particular moment in my particular moment in time. Um, because I felt like I was all over the place. There was no clear direction on what the path was supposed to look like specifically. I wasn't aware of what a security analyst was, SOC analyst, what all was involved with being an engineer, a pen tester. I knew that there were certain skill sets to operate in this space, but once I interned with Alias, a lot of that became very much clear.
Okay, gotcha. Um, so were there any things that you felt like you weren't prepared for? Was there anything that, like, do you think if you had taken a different route, do you think there would be things that would be easier making that transition from intern to entry level role as SOC analyst?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I don't think so at all. I feel like any internship opportunity that's given to anyone is really what you make of it. Um, if you what I learned most, especially during like maybe the first week, there was not going to be any clear direction provided to you, and that's by design. In order to truly be successful in this particular space, you have to learn to think for yourself, have your own ideas. Also understand what it's like to take initiative. If you're someone who's used to receiving direction, chances are you're only going to go as far as you allow yourself to go.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. So, okay, so you went from SOC analyst, and then you kind of worked your way around, and now you're engagement manager. So you kind of help direct the whole team and everything like that. So, I guess before we get too far from it, I do want to talk about some of the universities. So we talked about my path, which I would say is kind of the old school path where you do IT, you do the admin stuff, you learn security that side,
Yeah.
and then you transition into security. I would say one of the newer roles that I see a lot of people doing is the SOC analyst role, right? Well, I think that's an awesome entry-level role.
Absolutely, 100%.
And there was not really that around, years and years ago. Now
Do you wish it was?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I don't have any regrets. I still like networking. I enjoy it.
Yeah.
I learned a lot from it, and the knowledge that I gained from a dozen plus years of doing that is I'm able to take that information daily, right?
And on the I guess on the contrary to that, there were often times early on where I felt like I should have taken a similar path as you.
Sure.
Especially in terms of, like, I guess becoming outside of that imposter syndrome. Whenever you're navigating through and you don't have a particular background, it's easy to fall into that. And that was very much so for me early on. Sometimes I still feel that way, but I pretty much tend to lean on my team to kind of ask questions and also understand how to ask questions now.
Right, right. Well, I mean, I think the imposter syndrome thing is very normal. I think that in security, we stand on the shoulders of giants. Everybody does.
Mm-hmm.
The best engineer at your company is still using, or the best pen tester is still using tools that other people made.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe there's some psychopath listening who they program all their own tools, they use all their own scanners, they don't use any exploits, that they find all their own ODays. Sure, maybe you're that guy. I'm not.
A special person.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that person is got a screw loose. I mean, yeah, sure, maybe you're great, but there's no reason to reinvent the wheel every single time, in my opinion. So I think that it's perfectly normal to feel that way, because I have to think like, okay, I'm using this tool, and while I will take it apart, look at the code, try to figure it out, it's going to be inevitable that some things that I'm doing, I don't fully understand.
Right.
That I have to go, oh crap, how does that work? How does that tool do that? And dig into it and try and figure it out.
Yeah.
Okay, this exploit, okay, I see the exploit, I see the POC, but I don't understand ROP chains. How does this work? Like, there's always going to be something that you don't understand that somebody else figured out. And so I think that the, imposter syndrome thing is kind of like everybody's going to have that.
Yeah.
Like, there's just, it's not something, no one person is going to do everything in this field alone.
No.
It's a lot of stuff's open source. There's a lot of community to it. There really is.
Yeah, there really is. I agree with that 100%.
So I think that what I see a lot of people talking about is, let me give you an example. We have an internship program right now. There's my plug. We see a ton of resumes, and this is not to speak poorly of anybody, but we see a ton of resumes that is, I'm a computer science student.
Yep.
Which is, they say, hey, go to computer science. You can do security, or even if it's a security program. And I look at their resume and it says, they have maybe irrelevant work experience or no work experience. That's fine. It's an internship. But I'm looking for things people have done, and their degree will say,
yes,
I did this hackathon, which is coding, right? It's just programming. I did this coding boot camp, which is just coding. And I look at it and I'm like, you don't do anything that's relevant to this job. You didn't list anything that's, you didn't tell me about stuff you've hacked. You didn't tell me about programs or like that are relevant to security.
Yeah.
Like, you told me you coded a game thing and like a calendar thing, and like, that's cool, but I don't care for this role. Right? It doesn't have anything to do with what we do.
Right.
And that is the role that education pushes. They say, you go here, you do your university, and then you get an internship because you did your computer science university, and you can make great money in cybersecurity. First off, you can make better money as a software dev, likely, because it's a lot harder to get into cybersecurity.
Right.
It's not, if money is your sole factor, don't even bother. You can make more money elsewhere with an easier job.
There's a huge disconnect between those who develop those curriculums at different institutions and the need to actually have a cybersecurity cybersecurity concentration, but then have those same students go through all this development work as if they're becoming software developers.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you the last time I've coded a piece of program.
Right. I didn't really do it until I was principal engineer.
Really?
I mean, it's not really much of a thing in the day-to-day. If you want to take on projects and work on stuff, yeah, sure. And it's not like learning how to code is bad.
Right.
That's always going to be helpful.
Yeah.
Like, learning any base knowledge you can learn from will always be helpful. But I would think the path to come in as a software engineer is where you came in and you started reverse engineering things, and you found exploits, and you came from that kind of exploit dev where you started writing tools. Like, it's not just, I learned programming, let me pen test. Like, it just doesn't really work like that.
No, it doesn't.
So here's my hot take. I think that the way that traditional universities, higher education stuff is set up is not really conducive for security. I think the field changes too much. I think that the things that I did 6 months ago aren't necessarily what I do today. And whenever you talk about how a curriculum is developed, we should get Todd to talk about this. He knows about, I think because I'm kind of talking out my neck a little bit, but I think of how a curriculum is developed. It doesn't happen overnight.
Nope.
It takes time to be developed, and then it has to be vetted, and then it has to be put into place, and then maybe the next year. So what are we talking about? 2, 3, 4 years? And then how long until that curriculum gets updated? Another 3 years? You talking about you're learning things 5, 6, 7 years old?
I'm glad you brought that up because at Rose State, they're actually going through the process of getting a bachelor's program approved for cybersecurity. That's been going on for the past 2 to 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So once it's finally approved and actually implemented, how old is the curriculum now versus what we see today? That just goes right along with that.
Right. So I think it just, through the design of typical higher ed, I don't think it works very well to teach the stuff. I don't want to discourage people from going to college necessarily. I mean, if you got a scholarship or something, freaking do it, you know? But I mean, if you're looking at, okay, I could get this cert and I could go into the workforce, or I can take out student loans and I can go get into debt, and then maybe in 4 years I can have to get the cert anyways and then go to the workforce. Like, I don't think it's the best path.
I honestly just didn't want to spend all that money on certs. That me personally, I just did not see myself. I was not in the financial position to afford it. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go out here and network my ass off.
And that's the most important thing over everything.
Yeah.
Honestly, as I kind of hate to say it, but I say who you know is really more important than what you know.
Yeah.
But what you know still matters. You have to have both. But who you know can help guide you on what to know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anybody that talks to me, like I have people that hit me up on LinkedIn, email, people hit me up on Discord all the time, and just ask me random questions. I'm always happy to help people, right? I mean,
and that's the number one thing I noticed making that transition. Everyone that I crossed paths with was so super helpful in terms of providing me with direction or connecting me with someone who could answer any question that I had, which was so different from what I was used to.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that goes back to the cybersecurity being kind of a community thing, I think.
I agree.
Possibly. Which is, by the way, so different than whenever I started off. Learning it.
How
and
so?
Oh, dude, you'd hop in an IRC server, Internet Relay Chat.
Mm-hmm.
Man, you'd hop in and you would ask some questions and, oh my God, you freaking noob. Look at this guy. He doesn't know crap. What is he doing here? GTFO. They kick you from the server.
Man.
Absolutely. And, you just have to be persistent and kind of learn, like not annoy people, but you'd have to figure out how to, like, slowly get their trust and then find someone you can ask questions to. And, like, especially because you couldn't Google it. You couldn't YouTube the stuff.
Right.
Like, there was very little information. So, yeah, it's the fact that I think personally, the reason why I'm always down to answer questions is because I had that.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I would love to be a resource that I never had.
Yep.
And so I think that there's probably a lot of people who share that mindset.
Yeah, there's so many people out here that feel the exact same way.
Yeah, for sure.
I tend to actually encourage people to find projects that they're interested in and just work through them. Like a good friend of mine, he's interested in getting into cybersecurity. And so he's just been going down rabbit hole after rabbit hole. And as soon as I told him to just find a project related to cybersecurity and see how you do, first thing he came up with, man, I built an encryption cipher. I was like, that's what's up, man.
Yeah,
Keep going,
dude.
Find another one.
Yeah.
Do something else. Add that to your resume.
Yeah. No, I remember it was a lot of similar stuff. I mean, that's it. I have never known how to do a project when I started a project.
Really?
Like, almost never. I mean, like, if I'm just, it'd be really cool if I made this tool. I might not know what language that tool needs to be coded in or know if I know how to code that language.
But the fact that you went through the process and figured it out.
By the time I had it, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, don't be afraid to start a project. And that's it, man. Just jump into something and you'll figure it out as you go. And there's so many resources. That's the main thing is, like, man, there's the information is almost not even paywalled.
Right.
Like, I mean, and to touch on certs a little bit, you don't need certs. Certs are cool.
Mm-hmm.
I have friends who are high up in the industry who don't have any certs.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's not something that you have to do. I think do a cert to learn if there's a cert that you think is great for it.
Right.
There are some certs that are good just to carry their weight, like CISSP.
Mm-hmm.
CISSP is a kind of a very generalized cert in security. It's not going to teach you to be a pen tester or a SOC analyst, but it carries a lot of weight. So if you're like, okay, I just want to, advance my career, like, okay, maybe get a CISSP. But for the most part, I don't choose certs unless I want to learn the material,
right.
or if in my role, if I want to understand the material to know that if it's a good cert to recommend to people or to have the team do.
And it's just like the PMPT certification
Mhm.
through TCM Security. As soon as I started diving into the content and the material, I was like, oh yeah, this is definitely information that I want to learn, skills that I want to learn.
That's why that's the main one that I've been recommending to people. Actually, shout out TCM Security. Those guys are awesome. But yeah, that one is phenomenal
It
because
is,
I looked through the curriculum and I was like, oh, this is what I do on a pen test.
right?
Like it was actually what I do on a pen test, down to making a report and delivering the report.
Yep.
Like that one's good, not just because get cert to put on resume, because you'll learn to be a pen tester through
Right.
it. Like, no, it's not going to be the only thing you need to know. You don't get that and you're ready to go into a senior role. Like it's not, but you,
Right.
that would, if somebody has that cert, absolutely. I'm going to be like, okay, cool. They must know this. Now I'm still going to ask them questions on an interview. I'm going to say, okay, cool. I'm going to grill you on the PNTP. But yeah, man, I think that's a very good way to get into it.
What are some for someone who's interested in getting into pen testing? What are some of the key questions or answers you're looking for whenever you're interviewing someone?
So one thing that I always ask is, what's the coolest thing you've ever hacked?
Nice.
I ask that to everybody. I've had all kinds of cool answers. I had a guy tell me one time he took apart his Xbox. He wanted to play this game, and the game was it was a Japanese game.
Gotcha.
And he took apart his Xbox and figured out how he could like go into the JTAG and change the country code on his Xbox because it couldn't play Japanese games because it was a US Xbox. So he figured out how he could like take it apart and like hop into it and change the country code on the Xbox. That way he could do that.
Wow.
And like we hired that guy. Like that was so cool, you know? Like that's the type of thing that I love to hear. Now, don't get me wrong, I'll ask you like I ask some basic tech questions depending on the role. I'm gonna ask, what do you like? What do you know about networking? Can you tell me the OSI model? Can you tell me, And a lot of the times, I'm gonna ask people a question, and I'm gonna drill, and I'm gonna see where they run out of knowledge.
Gotcha.
And
Or
maybe
see
that's
what hole they put themselves in.
yes, or see the hole. That happens for sure. So I'll always ask about networking. I'll always ask about Windows. I'll always ask about Linux.
Gotcha.
Just I try to be general on those, and depending on the level of the role is depending on how in depth we'll ask the questions.
Gotcha.
But what's something you've hacked? I always ask people. I try to get people to a point where they'll say I don't know, and then I say how would you know? Like how would you find out? What would you do?
Gotcha.
And then maybe they say I Google it, and I'm like, what if you're on site and you don't have Google?
Because that does happen.
It does happen.
That does
absolutely. And but it's funny. I have people give me different answers for that all the time, and people get really creative with it. And I'm like, damn, I just hotspot my phone.
Had to do that a few times.
yeah. But yeah, no, I always get people to. I try to make people think out of the box.
Right.
Take people to a point where it's like, okay, you don't know, so let's figure it out. Let's talk about it together. Right? Let's see if we can figure it out. If people put a lot of coding stuff on their resumes, sometimes I'll ask some coding questions. And mostly just be like, basically, here's a problem. How would you solve this problem? Just to see like how do they think a little bit? Yeah.
What's the thought process?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I guess one thing I wanted to kind of cover also is, what do you think the best way is? If you were starting from zero, you were 10th grade in high school, and what would you tell yourself to do to be able to go into security?
Just Google it.
Just Google it.
No, serious. I would Google it, but what I would also do is search GitHub for several projects. I would also just play around with virtual machines. I know MITRE Attack Framework offers like a simulation called Caldera. Just if you can download that, install it, or deploy it on a virtual machine, because I mean it's filled and it contains a lot of different viruses, malwares that you can just simulate in a virtual environment and just study it. Like if I was in 10th grade, that's all I would do is just study.
Yep.
I would treat it like a game.
How do you feel about if you were going from there? Would you look for vocational programs, or would you try to do university, or what do you think?
It kind of depends. If I could go back, I'd probably take the vocational route instead of going to university. Universities are what they are. There are good programs out there. However, I feel like the vocational programs, as well as some boot camps, tailor to what's current.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Votex are awesome. I think that's really the way to go.
And what I also find is that the instructors, the people involved behind the scenes, they are also active in the community.
100%.
Super active.
Yeah, just about every local Votech, we've had them in our office where they
Yep.
tour and they say, what do we do for our curriculum? Like, we've advised on a lot of that. And
Right.
I haven't had one university do that.
Nope.
Yeah.
Not yet.
And maybe they probably can't. They probably have boards and crap they have to.
I'm sure.
They have to go through. But yeah, it's. I think that they're great. And most high schools that I'm aware of these days, at least in our area,
Mhm.
they have like free programs for it.
Right.
And then you can go once you graduate. You can even usually get another free year or two at the Votech.
That's awesome.
So I mean, I think that's by far the best way to go. If you want to do, lots of fields, I think that universities are great. I think that they're the way to go. But I think that IT in general is really a trade.
I agree.
And I think that treating it as a trade is probably better for career advancement and placement as well. You don't need a degree necessarily. Now, some companies require you to have a degree. I remember
Depending on how big they are.
Yeah. Some companies, they won't even look at your resume unless you have a degree.
I would call them out, but
Yeah.
I would call them out, but it's okay.
But if you your goals to work for a huge organization like that or something, yeah, get your degree, do your thing, but just
Right.
know that it's a checkbox. You're hitting a checkbox more than anything. So figure out kind of what you want to do, I guess. But if you don't know, man, Votech is indispensable. It's the way to go, in my opinion. And then from there, some of these certs that we were talking about, a lot of them aren't that expensive.
No, absolutely.
I mean, couple $100,
Right.
and I know that's, whenever, especially if you don't have a job, you're trying to get in, that can be tough. But compared to college debt, it's going to be a lot easier in the long run. Yeah, for sure. I didn't mean to just come on here and talk crap about college the whole time.
Man, I mean, we're just being honest about the education and what most people believe to be the correct path or correct way to get into or break into this industry, and it's not much so. It tends to be a bit more about who you know as opposed to what you know, and based on what we know in our own personal experience, it's not the traditional path.
Yeah.
Especially nowadays.
So let's break it down. Most important things: network,
Mm-hmm.
learn projects, take on a project, no matter what it is. Take on a project that you can talk about, blog about it,
Mm-hmm.
post about it on LinkedIn,
Yes.
make a YouTube video about it, make something about it, put it on GitHub. I love when I see GitHubs on resumes. I will
Yep.
check every project. Absolutely.
That's super dope.
Yeah. What else? You got any other? Learn questions to ask is one that I would say also.
Yes.
You should
Show up. Just be intentional and show up. When it comes to networking, just keep showing up. Find local events. Get into volunteering if you have to build relationships with people who may know other people in this industry.
Yeah, that's huge. There's all kinds of local events. ISSA meetings,
Mhm.
most of the ISSA meetings, I think you can just show up, message those people, try to get involved. 2,600 meetups. We still have one here. There's still 2,600. There's DEF CON groups.
Yep.
The DEF CON groups are usually great. There's a whole bunch of good ones. They have talks. They have people there. They have projects to help you on. Like, it's free information. You can just
Right.
show up and someone will be doing a talk on something. Like, you just show up and you learn stuff for free. That's all there is to it.
Tell you what, another trick would be just showing up on a college campus, pretending to be a student and asking for information.
Yeah.
I've done it a time or two.
Social engineering your way in there.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, man. You got anything else?
That's about it, man.
About it? All right. Well, I just wanted to kind of talk about that because I thought it was so interesting that we have such polar opposite ways that we got in,
Right.
and neither of them are the way that they tell you to get into cybersecurity.
100%.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you everybody for hanging out. This is the SecureAF. I almost said the other one. Sorry. Check the other podcast. That's a bit of a plug. I run the Secure After Dark podcast. It's fun. It's a little less professional, but we have a good time. So thank you everybody for checking out the SecureAF podcast, and thank you for joining me, Keelan.
Gang.
Yeah. All right. Thanks everybody.